Hi again. My name is Kudama Njonjo, Power Shift Africa, and I'm primarily focusing on the Just Transition Work program. I think you saw me looking at my phone, and what has happened that the new text just came out for the negotiations literally 2 minutes ago. But why I was having a quick look at it is because for the last year, as civil society, especially from Africa, we've been fighting for what we're calling the Belém Action Mechanism. The Belém Action Mechanism is basically the opportunity for us to create a global just transition mechanism that will essentially support just transition pathways across the world. For the first time, finally, in written language at COP, we're actually seeing the mention of a mechanism, and it's been defined as a just transition mechanism. This is a huge success for us. Why this is important? It is important because all the just transition pathway plans that have been put in place so far have not been working. On the continent, in Senegal and South Africa, we'll give you very practical examples. The just energy transition plans that were put there. South Africa was promised $10 billion. They only received $300 million of that. And of that $300 million, nearly 60% went to consultancy fees for global north organizations. This is the problem with the just transition as we know it. It does not speak to the needs of the developing world. So we are excited that finally in the negotiations, we might be getting a breakthrough about the mechanism. Added to that, we're also speaking from the African lens that we needed language that spoke about the important role that transition minerals speak to in the transition. It was a huge hole that we kept seeing in this situation, where we kept speaking about energy transition without mentioning how do you actually build these transitions. Minerals are now adequately being mentioned in this program, and we really want to push on that. But it's important, and the language is the most important here. When the European Union mentioned this, they were speaking about supply chains. And from the global south, we were saying that's what we're trying to break here. A just transition means value chain development, value beneficiation, where the producers are. And most of those minerals are in the global south. So again, that's why the just transition program is important for this conversation. But more critically, it is something that the global south are offering to the global north because they do not have these minerals. So when we're speaking about the means of implementation, another big issue within the just transition pathway, we are seeing that the global north are worried that this is just a financial thing, and they are worried that the funding will have to come from them. Of course, public finance has to come from the ones that have been polluting, but we are saying we are also supporting. The minerals are from the global south, so we're not coming here as if we don't have something that we're offering. We are offering. We've offered the mechanism. We've also offered the minerals that we're putting, and we need a global governance framework to support with this. Lastly, and I think this is important, a lot of the just transition conversations are focused on two things: public finance, sorry, not public finance, public governance or private sector players in terms of the just transition. Africa's history and Africa's economies are not structured as if it's just government and private players. We have multitude of SMEs, a multitude of cooperatives, and those should be recognized as part of the just transition. Why? Part of just transition is trying to support adaptation efforts, and we can only do this at the ground, on the floor. And on the ground for us, we speak about cooperatives, we speak about informal traders, and those have to be recognized as important economic actors in the just transition. That way we can actually get results. In conclusion, as I mentioned in the introduction, we're excited that the mechanism has been mentioned in this developing text. We're going to keep pushing for it and ensure that we're not just trying to improve what is already existing, which is what the global north want to do, because those systems do not work. What we need is this global transition mechanism, and we push for it as we go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So my name is Amy Gilliam Thorpe. I'm from Power Shift Africa. So coming into COP, we heard that this would be an adaptation COP, and we're certainly seeing a strong focus on adaptation with a lot of political attention. I think over the last week, we've seen within the global goal and adaptation negotiations significant focus on the indicator list, particularly whether to adopt the list or not. A lot of concerns raised around the means of implementation indicators versus enabling conditions. I think across the board, developing countries have been very clear that they are not happy with the list as it is, particularly indicators on private finance, those on national budget allocations, because ultimately what they're doing is infringing national sovereignty and shifting responsibility and burdens to developing countries. And other key areas of focus have been, the further work on the indicators post COP30, the Baku adaptation roadmap, adaptation finance also being really central, and linking back to the means of implementation, which is finance, capacity building, and technology transfer from developed to developing countries. I think perhaps just to touch on and focus on the indicator list and a lot of the tension that's occurring between countries around whether to adopt the list or not. We obviously see some groups and countries, blocs expressing that they want to adopt the indicator list with some changes to the indicators, and those are mostly the developed countries, along with Grupo Sur and ELAC. LDCs and Arab Group expressed yesterday that they've got issues with the indicator list, and are open to exploring those issues, and then would from there decide what option they would go with. I think just to emphasize that Africa's position is a strong one, that the indicator list and adopting it is not an option. They prefer a 2-year policy alignment process, specifically to ensure that the indicators align with the Paris Agreement and the UN Convention, but also to ensure that there's coherence in terms of how they're integrated into national adaptation plans, into biennial transparency reports, and how they then feed into the global stocktake. And perhaps for me to just pause here and to emphasize that Africa is not purposely trying to delay ambition here and progress on adaptation. The climate crisis is an existential threat for Africa. Our communities are already living with and experiencing the finance and action gap, with floods, droughts, heat waves worsening every year. So fundamentally, this is not necessarily just about the technical details. It's about the politics of responsibility and justice, because ultimately how we frame and measure adaptation shapes who is seen, it shapes who is heard, it shapes who is supported, and how just those outcomes are. And so the concern is that if we lock ourselves now into an indicator framework that imposes conditionalities, but also are inherently unfair and unjust, then ultimately we're setting ourselves up for failure. And we've compromised once, many times already, in terms of the outcome on the new climate finance goal, but also in terms of the global goal on adaptation targets. And so this is really about holding the line and ensuring that COP30's successful adaptation is a comprehensive adaptation package that goes beyond simply the indicators, but really secures quality adaptation finance and the means to support implementation. And if COP can deliver on those, then it's ultimately marking a turning point for adaptation, which has historically been sidelined in these processes, but would also help restore faith in multilateralism. I'll stop there.
The COP went off to a fairly smooth start, at least negotiations-wise. No comment on the logistics and other incidents, but in terms of the negotiations, one of the main points to note is that an agenda fight was avoided at the start of the COP, and the way the agenda fight was adopted was that the presidency committed to take forward consultation on 4 key issues that had been proposed as agenda items by different groups of countries. And so consultations have been happening all of this week. I would say, and I can elaborate further later, we haven't seen much progress to date. So we're at the end of the first week, and countries still seem quite far apart, but we are hopeful that they will come together, and that some of the conversations that have happened to date have allowed countries to express why some of these issues are essential for them. And I think what we have before us are the ingredients of a potential high ambition package for this for the outcome of this COP. So what we have heard is the possibility of a cover decision or some other similar decision which would allow for a space for some of these items which, as of now, are homeless. They're not items on the agenda, but they are hugely important. So, what are they? They are. I'll begin with one, notably from AOSIS, Palau on behalf of AOSIS, so the Alliance of Small Island States, calling for a space to look at NDCs, because this is the year of NDCs. So looking at their collective ambition, looking at their implementation, looking at also even the lack of means of implementation, including finance, and trying to have a collective conversation on that. Obviously, taking the 1.5-degree goal as the litmus test. So that's obviously really important from the standpoint of ambition. And we hope that we can find a way to move us closer to 1.5 degrees coming out of this COP. However, it's not so simple as simply asking countries to increase ambition. And this is where some of the proposals that have come in from some of the other developing countries, like notably India and the LMDCs, the like-minded developing countries, around Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement, which is around the provision of finance, are really crucial, because these countries say that we cannot, in good conscience, commit to enhancing our ambition if we do not have the means with which to enhance our ambition, and also even the means with which to deliver our existing ambitions. So we've had some constructive proposals also from African countries about focusing on how within our existing NDCs there are the conditional commitments that are not yet financed and that require immediate attention. So I think you can see a package, a high ambition package. I think the way we're looking at it would entail both elements on mitigation as well as finance and other aspects of the Paris Agreement, which are obviously expected to see advancements at this COP as well, notably adaptation. And I'll pass maybe to my colleague to say a few more words on adaptation.